looking back at the year's top stories.
They should not fund this wall.
The decisions we debated.
I'm sure the new superintendent would come in and set their own priorities.
And the conclusions we came to. This is Metro Week. Hi, I'm Andrea Kelly. Thanks for joining us for this final episode of Metro Week. We're reflecting on the big stories of the year, starting with federal policies that locals reacted to. That's after a look at the week's top stories from the Arizona Public Media Newsroom.
Pima County may ask the Regional Transportation Authority to take over road maintenance in unincorporated areas. Republican Supervisor Steve Christie asked the county attorney's office if there were any legal issues with tasking the RTA with maintenance projects paid for through a county property tax. During Tuesday's supervisors meeting, Deputy County Attorney Andy Flagg said there's nothing preventing the RTA from playing a role in road repairs. Such a structure could become part of a proposal Supervisor Christie has pushed since joining the board this year, in which a half-cent sales tax would replace a property tax for road repairs. All proceeds from the sales tax would then be handed off to the RTA, earmarked for repair of ailing roads around the county. Pima County's flu season is off to a strong start with more than 150 cases reported since October. County health officials say a strong start doesn't necessarily mean the season will be any worse than normal. Recent years have had a slower start than this season. Each had fewer than 30 cases by this point, and flu cases extended into the summer. An historic building in Nogales, Arizona has a new purpose. The home of former Arizona Governor Raul Castro will be turned into a center for youth to learn about documentary filmmaking and the arts. The Castro family donated the elegant home to the University of Arizona. The house needs to be remodeled. Funding for that project will come from a $350,000 grant from Art Place America. Classes in the historic building are scheduled to start in the spring of 2018. For more on this week's news, check out our website, news.azpm.org.
One of the stories driving the year in local news was a fairly steady stream of reactions to national news. The policies President Donald Trump's administration spearheaded this year got attention from local governments, nonprofit organizations, and the public.
Can be a driving force.
The first local reaction to President Trump's inauguration was a women's march in January, organized to coincide with similar events throughout the world. Two of the organizers in Tucson said they weren't explicitly reacting to the president, but to the rhetoric during the election.
I think that for me, like millions of women around the world, this election was a real tipping point where we felt compelled the day after to move into action to defend our rights, especially the rights of our sisters that bear the double burden of being oppressed because of racism or because of religious persecution. And the whole tenor of the last campaign has really been vicious.
And getting active, I think, has brought me that hope after kind of, like Maria said, watching the fallout from all the campaigns and from the election and the policy changes that we're seeing proposed. I have 3 very young children, and they're a huge motivator for me also. I feel like if enough of us stand up, that we can guarantee a future for them that holds the same rights and freedoms that I've enjoyed, and maybe even an expansion of those rights and freedoms.
Within a week of the president's inauguration, local churches said they were preparing for a new sanctuary movement, an organized effort to protect immigrants facing the prospect of deportation. Nancy Montoya brought us the story.
They are congregations who have taken the sanctuary pledge that states this: as people of faith and people of conscience, we pledge to resist the newly elected administration's policy proposals to target and deport millions of undocumented immigrants and discriminate against marginalized communities.
Now, there is pushback in Pima County. David Eppeheimer, the chair of the Pima County Republican Party, was raised in the Presbyterian Church and became an ordained elder. He feels personally that you cannot pick and choose what laws to follow.
I think I understand the issue, and I think I understand what they're trying to accomplish. I'm against it all. I think that it's misguided. I think that the movement encourages the breaking of federal law.
To date, we have no reports of immigrants taking sanctuary in Tucson area churches this year. Next on the federal agenda, a travel ban and a cap on the number of refugees who come through resettlement services in Tucson. Each year, Tucson receives between 800 and 1,200 refugees. One of the people who was resettled in Tucson this year, before the temporary ban, was Suleiman Shireh. Born in Somalia to Somali parents, he lived in Kuwait most of his life. And how long have you been in Tucson?
I've been here around 9 weeks.
9 weeks?
Yeah.
And recently some other family members came. When was that and how did they come?
Actually, my family is supposed to be here in 1st February.
Okay.
But they denied, I don't know, in these situations. But we're lucky, so we came here around 10 days ago.
The rest of your family?
Yeah.
So they were supposed to arrive and they were blocked because of the first refugee ban that the president initiated. Once that was put on hold, they were able to come?
Yeah.
What's it like having them here finally?
Great, actually, very happy.
And you were living with them in Kuwait?
Yeah.
Okay, so you were apart for about 9 weeks, the time that you've been here. And I understand you have a brother who's still there.
Actually, I have two brothers, one in China, he's studying in China. The other is still in Kuwait, and he is still in the process. So we don't know when he will come.
And what kind of job were you doing in Kuwait? What employment would you hope to get here?
Actually, in Kuwait, I was a soccer player,
okay.
Filmmaker at the same time. I was studying EMT, like emergency services, paramedic. But when I arrived here, they told me, oh, you can start from zero.
And Barbara, having to start over with education, is that a typical experience?
That is a typical experience with refugees that come, and it's a devastating fact to realize that all their accreditation is not valid here for the most part from any university in outside of the United States. So if you come as a practicing medical doctor, you have to go back to medical school. Same for engineers or choose another path.
In April, U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions visited the border in Nogales to talk immigration crackdowns.
The lawlessness, the abdication of duty to enforce our laws, and the catch and release policies of the past are over. For those that continue to seek improper and illegal entry into this country, be forewarned. This is a new era. This is the Trump era.
It did surprise me that Sessions said that, because Sessions has said that through Congress his whole life. A major opponent of any immigration reform.
The rhetoric kept up. In June, Tucson and Pima County politicians joined representatives of the local tribes in expressing their opposition to the Homeland Security Department's plans to expand the wall along the U.S.-Mexico border.
We're really working with cities and counties across the nation that are passing similar kind of resolutions during the month of June in hopes of having the congressmen and congresswomen understand that they should not fund this wall because they don't have the money to do it.
The city and county are the latest local governments to oppose the wall.
When the executive order passed back in January of this year, the Legislative Council passed a resolution opposing the wall. And we have been opposed to the wall because it doesn't work.
Companies vying to get the contract to expand the border wall have built prototypes, and the wall is definitely a conversation that will continue in 2018. Another federal story we followed this year was the near-constant debate about health care policy. Congress debated bill after bill to repeal the Affordable Care Act and options to replace it with new health care system reforms. Amid that, we checked in with the people you elected to cast those votes. First up, Congresswoman Martha McSally, talking about the three-pronged process she wanted to see for health care changes. The first step was the budget reconciliation process, which we know failed.
The second bucket, as you will, is the HHS secretary authorities that are within the executive branch, within the authorities of that secretary to provide some stability and relief to stabilize the markets right now, because the insurance companies are having to come out with their plans for the fall. This is all happening right now in the spring, and so there has to be some stability provided because this is going to be a long-term process. And so then that third bucket are things that take 60 votes in the Senate. That's going to be legislative changes, and we'll have to work with Democrats in order to move some of those forward. But the transition period of that first vote is really important, because people think once that first vote happens, like, oh, everybody who's had a Medicaid expansion or has been on the exchanges and gotten subsidies or has some sort of insurance, even though it's very difficult to afford, that all of a sudden it's going to be gone. That is not the case. That is not in the drafts of the plan, and people like me have been advocating for about a 3-year transition so that we can provide some stability and continuity moving forward.
Well, when we look ahead to our future without Medicaid expansion and without access to care for thousands and thousands of people here, it's a pretty bleak future for us. We certainly survived for many, many years without expansion, but when the Affordable Care Act came into being, we saw incredibly good things happen with people who did not have access to care before. And we know that going back now will double or triple our bad debt, which in the case of a community hospital like Tucson Medical Center will take away all of our operating income.
Rich says it could take up to 3 years before large impacts are felt from Medicaid reductions because they'd roll in slowly. But she estimates 15 million people next year will not have any payment for their care. And if the hospital's revenue drops, so will its workforce. Before the Affordable Care Act,
we saw $20 million or more less revenue than we see now. In 2010, before expansion, we were barely making a 2% operating income. We saw many, many, many people present at our emergency department with no form of payment. And we certainly saw people delaying care. So once the Affordable Care Act came into being, we were able to add some programs to the hospital. We were able to do some care management outside the hospital that is expensive because it takes talented, licensed people to do a lot of their care management. And so going forward, we would have to pull out of those programs.
Well, Arizona is going to be particularly hard hit if these types of bills actually make it through and get signed into law. Arizona would lose about 400,000 people currently covered by Medicaid in the state, what we call access in Arizona. And that means about $7 billion over the next 10 years in cuts to Medicaid funding from the federal government. That will affect every hospital, rural hospitals, urban hospitals, and others, but it will particularly hit those hospitals that are in the most rural and remote areas and those hospitals that take care of people regardless of their ability to pay.
Keep in mind that this is still an increase in Medicaid spending. It's a decrease in the rate of increase of spending. And so Medicaid spending will still go up in real dollars in either of these bills over the next 10 years. It's just got some initiatives in there for traditional Medicaid, trying to have other states, quite frankly, model states like Arizona for traditional Medicaid. Arizona is one of the better models. We have managed care. We don't focus on fee-for-service. If the Medicaid expansion is going to be phased out, that is a very long off-ramp, that it provides the opportunity for the individual market to become strengthened, that it provides the opportunity for states, community health centers, and others to make sure that the safety net is there for them, and that we have the appropriate means for those individuals to have their health care needs met.
That's the whole problem, that not knowing exactly what the outcome of this whole drama that we've been unfolding now for about 6-7 months is that here's a distinct population, about half a million veterans across the nation, 7,000 here in Arizona, that'll be directly impacted. Access to Medicaid would be eliminated. So we're talking about the expansion. We're talking about the subsidies provided to states for that expansion, eligibility for Medicaid. And when you're cutting almost $1 trillion from the Senate bill from Medicaid in order to pass that on as tax relief to the richest people in this country, who's going to be affected? Those are people say unintended consequences. They're consequences everybody knew about when this bill started. And how you fix it is that you leave those situations alone in terms of health reform, Medicaid expansion, eligibility requirements as we have now, and put as a priority that these constituencies are not going to be affected.
As we know, Congress continues to debate the future of health care policy. The Senate version of a tax reform bill included repealing the requirement that everyone purchase insurance. That was called the individual mandate. Now, onto some local issues that caught our attention this year. We visited with the small towns that often get eclipsed by Tucson and Pima County politics. Here's what Marana wanted to accomplish in 2017 and how the towns are dealing with population growth.
One of our biggest needs is infrastructure. Our roads are pretty good, but we're looking at a lot of roundabouts in several of our major intersections. We think it's going to be more efficient, more economical, and move more traffic. So we're looking at those. We're building a new wastewater plant. We're building a new police station, and we're kind of a victim of our own success because we're growing so quickly. We need so many more amenities to serve the people.
What do you think you'd like to see in 2017 in terms of regional cooperation?
I think that's probably the place that we have more cooperation than anywhere else in the county, is the PAG and the RTA. It's really two different boards, but all of us are the same members on both boards. I'm the chairman of the RTA this year. We are trying to accelerate projects and get more projects done. And the new Ina Road interchange in Marana is an RTA project. Twin Peaks interchange that was finished about 3 or 4 years ago was an RTA project. And our biggest thing right now is the continuation of the RTA. We're going to look in the next year or two to go back to the voters and ask for an extension for more projects for transportation improvements in the county.
We talked last week with Marana Mayor Ed Honey, and he talked about how that town is managing the growth that it's still seeing. Is Oro Valley also still seeing growth? Is that part of your planning process?
We are. You know, we're pretty close to, we're very landlocked, obviously. We're about 6 square miles by 6 square miles. So our growth is going to come in the form of annexation, either annexing raw land north of Oro Valley, it's about 9,000 acres, or annexing existing unincorporated Pima County areas. So strategically, for some of our goals for next year are going to be looking at growth of the town of Oro Valley, but not through so much of an influx and development of land or current land, but really through acquiring other parcels.
Well, the goals for this upcoming 2017 year really rely probably on economic development, good growth, and really a rebranding effort, a branding effort that we're working through. We, from a regional perspective, with the expansion of Raytheon, the Caterpillar surface mining, their proving grounds is just west of Sahuarita. Freeport McMoran, Osarco, World Vision, so all of those we've been, and we think will continue to be, both directly and indirectly benefited by the expansion from an economic development perspective. We're typically growing 3 to 5% over the last few years, which I think is more manageable than our hyper-growth years of the mid-2000s, which were exciting, but they were very difficult to keep up with, especially with my other hat on the school board. It was really hard to keep in front of the growth of the schools.
In order to cut costs, South Tucson is considering closing its fire department and outsourcing that to the city of Tucson. They've also asked Tucson to provide police services for a few hours each day.
Because of the large deficit that we have that we're facing this coming budget year, we have to put everything on the table. And so we have to explore ways to cut costs and maintain the same level of services. And certainly because of the amount of money that we need to balance a budget, the two biggest departments within the city are the police and fire department. So we had to put those on the table, and we're looking at ways to try to keep what we have, but yet pay the bills.
In education, one story we covered during several episodes was the leadership of Tucson Unified School District. That's the largest district in the metro area, and it has a new superintendent. Here's how the district got there. The conversation began in February. The governing board met for 3 weeks in a row to talk about the future of then Superintendent Dr. H.T. Sanchez.
Well, this is really an outcome of the recent election. The majority of the 5-member board, a 3-2 majority, used to be in favor of keeping Sanchez around, and one of those seats changed, and there's a new board member who is in favor of dismissing him. So with such a small board, that one vote changing makes a pretty big difference.
The Tucson Unified School Board was scheduled to consider firing the superintendent since 2013, H.T. Sanchez. The board spent hours over the last 3 weeks in closed-door meetings about his contract before emerging with a decision Tuesday night.
This evening, the newly elected Tucson Unified Governing Board, with 3 votes, none of which would have been mine, was ready to fire our superintendent.
But then Sanchez resigned. Board members Michael Hicks, Mark Stegeman, and Rachel Sedgwick agreed to accept his resignation, effective immediately. Crystal Foster and Adelita Grijalva supported Sanchez.
The people that have been very negative about Dr. Sanchez, I hope you have your pound of flesh today. But no, the board members that are moving this agenda forward, the same people that will support you today and applaud you today for getting rid of Dr. Sanchez will turn on you when as soon as the new interim comes in and they don't do what you want them to do.
After Sanchez resigned, the board appointed Dr. Gabriel Trujillo to be the interim superintendent as it conducted a nationwide search for the next person tasked with carrying out the board's directions.
The ultimate goal is you want the best fit. You want the best fit of the leader with the challenges, short-term and long-term, for the district.
I'm sure the new superintendent would come in and set their own priorities, but I don't think it has affected much yet.
What are you looking for in that next hire, in the next person who will carry out the decisions the board makes?
Well, there's a question of what I'm looking for and what the board's looking for. I don't think it's actually very different. I think there's a lot of agreement on that. I think the biggest thing for me is someone who has a demonstrated record of raising student achievement. Everyone talks about raising student achievement. We are a poor community. We have a lot of lower income students. And it's hard to, there aren't that many persons who can really show that they did it. And so I want someone who not just talks about it, but can show that they did it.
And we now know the board decided to keep Trujillo as its permanent superintendent. We spoke with him in November after the district failed to get approval from voters to spend more money on school maintenance.
What happens now is we take the lessons learned from this election and we apply them so that we're more effective in telling our story next time. I think looking back that we didn't do a good enough job telling our story. That this is not a story about aging facilities and infrastructure. It's about dangerous facilities and infrastructure. It's about kids riding in 110-degree buses that don't have air conditioning. So I think listening to the electorate is important. The voters have spoken. We've got to take those hard lessons and apply them for the next time that we go out. And I think the second big learning is that the community has spoken quite loudly that we have quite a bit of work to do in order to earn their trust.
One of the largest employers in the metro area also got a new leader. University of Arizona President Ann Weaver Hart opted not to seek renewal of her contract. That left the door open for the Arizona Board of Regents to hire a new president.
So the process really began in August. The Regents formed a hiring committee formed of about 30 people from around the community, the university. They hired an executive search firm to identify prospective candidates. And they worked for several months on that process. In the last month, in February or so, the hiring committee then talked to more than 100 candidates, apparently, they say, and formed a short list. That short list was sent to the Board of Regents late February. And then last week, actually, they announced 2 finalists for the position. They were Sethuram Panchanathan from Arizona State University and Robert Robbins. On Monday of this week, they conducted interviews with both candidates, and on Tuesday made their big announcement.
What is your vision for working with students and getting to know them individually and, really understanding kind of what drives them, what brings them here to the University of Arizona?
Yeah, well, I already started. I started about 3 months ago making stealth visits with baseball caps and all that kind of stuff and wandering around campus and going and asking students, what do you do here? And, I got some strange looks. And, well, my son may be interested in attending here. So then they started opening up.
I think that comment kind of took people back in the room and caused some surprise in a good way. He also said he wants to be a leader in diversity, accessibility, affordability, and he's going to work to improve community relations.
I expect all of you to hold me accountable to the things that we come up with as strategic initiatives and objectives.
When Robbins got to campus officially as president, Vanessa Barchfield asked him about what he wants for the university.
This should be a safe harbor for everyone to come and to celebrate the intellectual exchange of ideas. I have been going from 7 in the morning to 11 o'clock every day, trying to meet as many people as I can to listen and learn and figure out how I can help them realize their hopes and dreams.
This month, Robbins began the task of writing a strategic plan to spell out what the university will focus on in the coming years. Another specific story the University of Arizona faced this year was a controversial plan to work with a private developer to build dorms north of campus.
Some details about the complex, which will be built on 3 city blocks in a neighborhood north of Speedway and east of Park.
So here is the Honors College dorm that includes the dining facility. I'm Peter Dorline, and I'm Assistant Vice President for Planning, Design, and Construction on campus.
Dorline's been working on the project for a few years. Developing the Honors College is a big priority for the U of A.
We're really looking to recruit and retain some of the most highest achieving students. And so that's in our honors program. And we're looking to develop a whole community which centers around housing. So there'll be 1,056 beds.
There'll also be a recreation center, dining hall, health center, and lots of parking. The project's being developed with American Campus Communities, or ACC.
They are essentially the largest private housing developer, student housing developer in the country, and the way they got that way is by having a really good reputation.
The neighborhood residents and Tucson City Council said the planning process wasn't transparent. These are some of the issues they raised earlier this year.
Well, the university is actually meeting with neighborhood representatives, but it's very late in the process. And we feel that there is actually no meaningful input being permitted on the part of the community. This project was originally conceived at least in 2013, possibly earlier than that. The first we heard of it was in 2013 when the private developer American Campus Communities came to discuss the project with us. At that time, they were seeking a rezoning because the land is currently in part owned by American Campus Communities and is subject to City of Tucson zoning. The rezoning process allows for public input at 3 different points, and so they were seeking to determine in advance whether the public would support the project. My neighborhood and 2 other neighborhoods said, this is not acceptable to us. It's wildly inconsistent with the underlying zoning, and we don't support it. And so then American Campus Communities went silent for a number of years, and this project came back in the form of a public-private partnership with the University of Arizona. That's really problematic in terms of cutting off public input.
We deal with private developers all the time. The correct process is for the developer to engage in the rezoning process. That's a very public process. It's time-consuming, but what it does is it gives both parties a chance to go before a zoning examiner, state their cases, and then the zoning will be either approved or denied with conditions, and then either party can appeal that to the mayor and council. The process that's going on right now, the public meetings, are really simply window dressing to cover up for the fact that that public process is being bypassed.
We've been working very collaboratively with the city and with neighbors, neighbor representatives, and neighbors who live in the area. A lot of the neighbors, of course, are our own students and faculty who live in the neighborhood, but we've been working with the entire community and been making accommodations to the project to make it a better project.
Some of those accommodations include repaving some streets, adding landscape and drainage, and the housing complex, which will stand 6 stories at its tallest, will be scaled down to 4 stories on streets that face houses.
Of course, we covered many more stories and more angles to these stories. You can look back at it all on our website. Once again, thanks for watching Metro Week these past 3.5 years, and this, our final episode. Now, a look at the new show we're debuting January 5th with Lorraine Rivera.
The issues and what they mean, the stories and how they impact you, and the discussion that helps you understand it all. I'm Lorraine Rivera. We're launching a new program that takes a 360-degree look at the stories and how they connect to your world. Arizona 360, coming January 5th to PBS 6.